Hold on. Where did I go? Oh, my mixer went to the background.
Watch Talk Heathen live Sundays at 1 p.m. Central. Visit tiny.cc/YTTH and call into the show at 512-991-9242 or connect to the show online at tiny.cc/callth.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Truth Wanted. I am your host, ExXtian Erin. This is the live call-in show that happens every single week on Fridays at 7 p.m. Central, where we talk to people about what they believe and why. If you'd like to call us, our lines are open. The number is 1-512-991-9242 or through your computer at tiny.cc/calltw. Truth Wanted is a product of the Atheist Community of Austin, a 501c3 nonprofit organization dedicated to the promotion of positive atheist culture and the separation of religion and government. Every single week here on the show, we have a special guest, and this week joining me is Jmike. Hi, Jmike.
It's actually funny you say special guest because a lot of my friends in high school, that was actually a joke. People would call me special guest because my band had played a show one time and we were all in the same band, but this guy sent a text message out to everyone and says, this band is playing featuring special guest Mike. And I was like, wait, why am I special guest? We're all part of the same, like, I'm not special or anything. And so it became this like huge inside joke. So they would get a kick out of just the idea of me as special guest. So,
well, you're our special guest this week. You're not new to the ACA, the Atheist Community of Austin, but this is the first time we've been hosting a show together. So I appreciate you coming on this week onto Truth Wanted. Normally you are on Talk Heathen, right?
That is right. Yeah, and thank you for having me on. I did one Truth Wanted with Dan,
right?
And this will be my second.
Awesome. I'm glad you came on today. You are somebody that I have known about for quite a while. I've seen a couple of the things that you've done online. I think the first time I saw anything that you did was on TikTok. We were just talking about this earlier that you haven't. I think you've been a little bit busy lately, but do you want to tell everybody who maybe doesn't know you what kind of things you do and how you got into the community or how you got into doing online atheist activism?
Sure. Yeah. Hopefully I don't get a bunch of things out of order. So I
generally.
Just generally, I guess I'll start back, I was a spiritualist. I wouldn't say the type of ones you see today, that are I believed, in certain things like Reiki and these things, but it's almost seems like any claim that comes near a New Age spiritualist now, they just kind of take without any justification or warrant to substantiate it. I felt like at least when I was a spiritualist, I kind of cared. And so that led me to, certain concepts when I was a spiritualist. We talk about metaphysics and these types of things. I was like, I don't really know what metaphysics is, and so I started Googling and started researching and kind of brought me into philosophy and actually understanding the terms. And I didn't get super into it, but it was enough for me to kind of dive down a rabbit hole of a bunch of different content. One of the first things I saw was why doesn't God heal amputees.com that a friend had showed me. And so I just got this different perspective that's, when comparison to what I had believed at the time, was like, wow, okay, this makes a lot more sense. I should look more into that. And so eventually that just kind of it died down for me. I didn't really get much into doing stuff online. But then I kept, actually the thing that sparked me into it is I had an Instagram account and I was following #atheist, and I would see all these Christian posts all the time. And it got me really, it would grind my gears. So it kind of got me back into tackling the arguments. And so I created a Instagram called correcting Christianity. And
Okay.
so
I see what you did there.
sorry, yeah, I got a little confused, but correcting Christianity. And then it didn't really do anything. Like it got a few views. It would just be me talking over some like meme that, you know, I would see on Instagram and just explaining why this doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
And someone was like, hey, you should do TikTok. That's this big thing. So I did that. And wow, little did I know there was just all these people that you could respond to and have conversations with. And so I met a bunch of people on TikTok, different content creators, met them in real life. That kind of got me cemented into the ground of that. I had a lot of different friends and people in the community at that point. And then started doing stuff with the ACA. And then then that's where I am now. And I've kind of abandoned TikTok since then. So sorry for TikTok followers, but TikTok is kind of on the back burner for me. This is kind of the stuff I care about the most.
I've heard that from a lot of people, including myself. Like I've had times where I really enjoyed getting on TikTok, and I find it like very a quick way to pass the time, especially during we've had a lot of times where we've been stuck at home or bored or whatever. I think it's like the biggest time sucker. Like I can be sucked into it for hours at a time. And there was a little bit of time where I was on it as well, but I've kind of moved away from that a little bit. I still go on there to like check things, like see where everybody's at. But I saw a lot of the back and forth going on with the atheists and theists, or just that whole conversation. And it's really interesting because you could like see somebody's response and then create a video right away and respond to them. But it's also, as somebody looking from the outside, it's hard. I was mentioning like hard to try to chase down the whole argument. So I do prefer longer form conversation places like YouTube, because you can actually follow through the same couple people talking through something and get all the way to the end of the thought. But it's a different format, and I think that it goes to show that there's these conversations going on everywhere, whether it's on Facebook or Instagram or anywhere. There's a lot of vocal people on both sides. And would you say that like seeing the vocal people from maybe the other side, or like the spiritualist side, like when they're being very like vocal about their positions, that it kind of, like you said, it kind of made you like kind of frustrated and you feel like you want to respond to that?
Yeah.
Like if they say anything, we wouldn't say anything.
Yeah, so it's like that similar kind of vibe, because it's like was like my home base, so to speak. At one point I get frustrated more, I guess, emotionally, whereas I've never been a Christian. So I would typically look at Christian stuff and I'm like, I'm just befuddled. Like, why do you believe that? Or why would you expect someone like me, an atheist, to accept that, right? Whereas in spirituality, I'm like, I'm getting like wanting to pull my hair out, because I'm like, you don't know anything about quantum physics. I don't know anything about quantum physics, but why are you making these kind of claims, right? So I get this type of like, this, I don't know how to describe it. It boils down into me. And we talked about a video that I did that I'll mention, that I found it was kind of like the nail in the coffin for me. But a further point is, when you mention like Facebook and TikTok and all these things, the point I wanted to make is the conversation on those things can stop whenever that person wants it to stop, right? If I reply to a video and they go, wow, that makes a lot of sense, but they don't want to admit that it makes sense, or some other person does that, right? They can just stop there. They don't have to come back and comment. They don't have to make another video. They can block you. They kind of just put themselves out of the conversation. So
that's true.
I agree with you in the first point you make, that I just think that the longer winded kind of conversations have more progress, and then you can always come back to them. And there's just a level of respect for the other person that I have, more so than someone that's can just kind of hide when they want to.
Yeah, I think it's good to like hear and talk to people, or see them through video. Like you you see a little bit more of that person as like an actual human, than whether you're just strictly commenting. Although I've had lots of really good conversations, even in such a short format as like on Twitter. It's a really, really short format, and I've always viewed it as kind of the opportunity to get my thoughts like kind of tight into like a single thought, that I'm wording it properly, because I don't have that much space for it. But
sure,
at the same time, you get people popping in and out of your conversations that are like, there isn't a lot of room for nuance, or like, really hashing through these things. So I don't know. I like a lot of different formats of conversation. This is obviously one of my preferred ones.
Sure.
When people call in, because you get enough time to like talk through something, and Yeah. So if you, one thing that you'd said that you were part of like your spiritualist movement, but you were never religious. Like you never like you were never part of a church or denomination or anything like that.
No, and there's like this nature to when you're kind of into the spiritualist thing to like really butt heads with the religious aspect, right? Like today, if you go on TikTok at all, like you'll see, you know, there's a Christian video. The hashtags are kind of merging, so now you're getting different people who's coming on the For You page, or you know, which is what the page that you see when you scroll down. That's starting to merge with different people, and so now I just see this kind of, it's funny because the religion spiritual thing butts heads, but they're the ones telling each other that your position makes no sense and is unfounded, and I'm just sitting there just like eating popcorn, you know, just like, really, is this what's going on?
You
right
guys are
now?
you're saying the same thing.
But there's a natural tendency for at least from my understanding and people I still talk to and friends with that are consider themselves spiritualists, that that's not, they don't want to be kind of associated in that light, which to me it's just as religious as anything else. But they're just it's like, you know, atheist, the term, right? If you mean something by it, I don't want to spend all this time focusing on the semantic dispute. I want to focus on what you mean by it, because more progress can get made rather than
and
like, am I religious or not? You know,
I don't have as much of a problem with somebody who says that they're like very spiritual, and with that personally means for them that they do a lot of meditation or hiking, and they like try to be mindful. Like some people would describe that as spiritual, but they're not necessarily going around making like these wild claims about quantum physics or
exactly.
You know, you're whatever, some healing something on the internal just by focusing on different chakras and things like that.
Which is why it's just a bad word to use in terms of spirituality.
Yeah, it is.
A naturalist could
kind of sloppy.
Use the word, you know. Yeah.
So I see the connection very clearly, because I had moved away from this very charismatic Christian fundamentalism, and I moved over into kind of the spiritualism new age type movement because it was a very comfortable place, and I didn't realize off the bat that the reason why it was so comfortable for me was because it's really, really similar. A lot of the same, just different wordings, but like a lot of the same kind of ideas are going on. The biggest one that I would compare it would be like faith healing. That's something that happened at, you know, in church, but then in the new age movement, it was about you can heal yourself well, just based on these kind of affirmations that you make, and that you kind of speak your own, you can manifest your own health. And it wasn't in that very long before I realized that it's the same thing. Like it's really grasping on the same kind of mechanisms, and there's really no substantial justification for any of it. So I definitely moved away from fundamentalism into spiritualism and new age, and then then started getting into skepticism, and I realized that I needed to take all the different claims and like think through them in the same way. That you don't get a special pass just because you don't like spiritualism or new age things. They don't get a special pass because they are not part of like a harmful fundamentalist religion, because I feel like they kind of want to separate themselves from that sometimes.
Yeah, well, that's the motive of any unsubstantiated belief from my perspective, is kind of let me sidestep the rigor of science or good epistemology, and in favor go with one that's clearly shittier. And to me, it's like, if you can do that, that's fine, but you know, it's just an admission that you don't actually have any like epistemic humility. You don't really care, you know, about like whether or not you could be wrong, or admitting that maybe my structure of getting there could be flawed. It's just this doubling down of like, I don't even need that stuff. It's like, yeah, okay, then I can't take you seriously. So
and there's a pitfall there that I think is becoming really evident now, that if you don't have a good way of thinking through these things, like on a personal level, you might fall into like some sort of maybe like not a very solid way of thinking through something that you're calling the spiritual realm. But if you're not learning a good epistemology and how to like think through things, you can end up believing something else. Like I don't want to use like a slippery slope fallacy, but kind of it's like if you don't have a good reason for belief in the way you have your spiritual or whatever, like I said, it's a kind of a sloppy word. Or if you don't believe in or if you don't understand why the scientific method is like our best method to determine truth, or a different kind of epistemology, you can fall into believing things that are really harmful. Like I guess
Yeah, exactly.
I see
Yeah.
that happening right now with there's so many conspiracy theories out there.
Oh yeah.
And it's become it's become its own pandemic of like bad thinking and
Mhm.
poor thinking, and people and I think it's because there isn't like this strong emphasis on why do we think things, and is there a good reason for that? And I don't know.
Well, it backs up to your initial point, right? Because it is kind of a cascading effect. You have this idea that I can just if you believe something, even in philosophy or whatever it is, like a big tactic that I use is, what does that belief commit you to? Rather than going through the premises of your argument, just going, well, I don't agree with premise 2, I'm going to get off like it's a bus stop and just say, I disagree with you, right? Like, because you can do that.
Mm-hmm.
But what you could do also is go, okay, you're committed to this belief. What does that commit you to? And if we kind of back up to the belief that I don't need like good epistemology, or I don't need something that's justificatory for my beliefs, then essentially that just commits you to the fact that I could rival you, some other hypothesis of whatever you're trying to explain. And because you've just admitted, right, as part of your framework that you don't care about, some framework that gets you there, well, then I've just underdetermined your theory with something else that's completely on a par. And there's nothing you can do because you've already admitted to a principle that allows for me to do that. And so it's just like people have to realize that once you set a belief in stone, that you're committed to other things that you might not realize, but it commits you to other things. And that's the thing, that if I'm committed to some philosophical position, goes, hey, that leads to like modal collapse or some, something where you don't want that. I want to know about that. Right. And so I don't think people do that when they invoke the epistemic framework for their beliefs. If they try to deny that, they don't realize that now they've opened themselves up to a world where ad infinitum I can make up things that are on a par with yours epistemically, because you've just removed that from the framework.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I think that we're this idea that you can come up with something that sounds really absurd to them because it's not part of like what they're comfortable with, this framework that they've been working with for a long time, but the reasoning is essentially the same. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah, well, so it's if someone's just going to say like, I don't need to commit to like kind of the sidestepping thing, right, that we talk about. It's like, if you want to sidestep some scientific rigor or way of understanding why your belief is true, or maybe just some epistemic framework or of epistemology, how we know it's true, you maybe just in some domain of looking at the reasons, right? Once you abandon that, you're just now committed to any other rival belief is just as valid. Right. And a lot of people do that, but they don't realize that's what they're committed to. Who says that I need this? Okay, well then fine. Anything I present to you now is on a par. And it's just not, do you want to be in that position? Because then it's just you're arbitrarily choosing beliefs.
And then do you see like when people are like, when you confront people with that, like what is their response typically? Is there like a backpedaling, or is there trying to like harmonize?
Well, they never will admit to it. They'll just say, I don't, well, there's reasons that I know that we should know beliefs, right? It's like, well, you're doing that now. I mean, you're in your way of trying to explain to me, you're trying to like present to me how I can know your understanding of where you're coming from, right? Within itself is some epistemic thing that I'm trying to understand you. So it's like the second they abandon it, it's like, well, let me get you to understand where I'm coming from. It's like, yeah, but that's the thing that you're abandoning is like required is for us to have reasons to understand. So why would you want to supply me reasons to understand your position? Because it doesn't matter if that's the principle. So
I'm trying to think of like a really good example to try to like because we talked a little bit earlier about like philosophy and like trying to understand different philosophical terms, and I am learning a lot of it, but I also try to I'm trying to kind of put things into like my real life, kind of make an analogy for myself because I'm not that familiar with lots of different terms. But what I would think is, tell me if this is a bad analogy, but like when somebody says that they are, they know that their belief is true because they've had this internal witness of the Holy Spirit or something. And if that's their reasoning for believing in it, I could come back with saying, well, I've had also a personal experience that, and my experience was that it said that your religion isn't true. Is that kind of the same thing?
Yeah. Well, yeah.
You're just using the reasoning against them in a way.
Yeah, and well, there's that I think is even like a bigger point, right? Because it's like what you're saying there is on a par of saying, well, my intuitions just make me feel that X is true. Well, how is that supposed to have any motivational force to somebody who just has different intuitions, right? Like, how is that going to actually move them anyway? Because their intuitions are not the same. And so, yeah, it would be the same, right? It's like I had this personal revelation or whatnot. I have a bigger question on that to step out and go, how do you, this is the whole presup thing. It's like, how do you know what's being revealed to you is actually the propositions, the value of the propositions being true, right? For example, like if God reveals to you that outside, these walls, it's raining and you don't actually know that, but he's revealing that to you. Well, it could just be the case that he's revealing you a proposition that's actually false, right? There's nothing about a revelation that isn't inconsistent with, them giving you false information. So it's like there's even a worse issue that if all you're going off of then is like personal revelation versus my personal revelation or a personal experience over my personal experience, like you could just be wrong, or the thing could just be presenting itself as a deception. And so that's like you have just further reasons on how do you really know. People kind of stop there and they're like, yeah, but that's not really a good no, it's a good criticism. If you can't find the contradiction that God could be revealing you contradictions, then you can't start it as like some presupposition, right? It's not epistemically founded. Right.
Oh. I love it. I get what you're saying. And I think that it's cool that you're kind of like, you're pushing these ideas back further and further too, because people get hung up on, they kind of get stuck on this is my justification. And then you're stepping it back even one further to ask, why is that your justification? And
sure. And that's what people do with the fine tuning, which is something really bothers me, right? They go into fine tuning and say, well, God had finely tuned these constants. But if you don't actually have a chain of explanation leading back to why God's desires desired those constants in the first place, like you haven't actually explained the fine tuning part, because are the desires of God finely tuned for those constants, right? You can just take the thing back a step, and people just think, oh, I have some justificatory thing here that justifies, right, some action that justifies my position. But it just seems the case that it's really not. It's just the fact that you're not realizing your task is to explain fine tuning, yet you can't explain why God has finely tuned desires for these specific constants. Like we're still moving it back a step. And some people, maybe it's people that get into philosophy just we just like do this ad infinitum, and it's maybe it's not the best thing, but for me it's like I can't help myself but go, did all you do really you just really kick the can down the road? You didn't really actually solve. You were trying to posit something with explanatory virtue, but you're not actually explaining the thing. Like the thing that you're positing is the explanation. You can't explain why its desires are finely tuning the constant. So yeah, it's like that whole principle that to me applies to almost every theistic argument.
Right. So are you saying that you're hoping that people call in today to talk about the fine tuning argument?
Oh, I will hope they want to talk about anything. I want to become a Christian or a spiritualist again. Right. If it's true, I want to become that. So please.
Yeah, we do have some calls on the line here, which we'll get to shortly. And there's a few more open if anybody else wants to call in. The number is on the bottom there, 512-991-9242. So we will hop into our calls here really, really quickly. First, I just wanted to take a quick moment and to make those aware who maybe hadn't heard that somebody in our own community, the atheist community, is going through a tragedy right now. Many people know Vice Rhino. He's one of the very active people on YouTube. Tragically, his wife passed away this morning. So we just, as a community, want to just take a minute to think about them. And if I know that they have posted online if anybody wanted to contribute to a donation, there's a fundraiser that they're doing, so you can check that out on Vice Rhino's YouTube channel, I think, or on his Twitter, and maybe we can even get a link going in at the bottom of our show notes here, that for anybody who wanted to kind of show some support that way. We're going to be all thinking about them a lot today, because that's really, really horrible. It was really sudden.
Yeah,
so.
and I'm hearing this information now for the first time, and it's one of those things where like there's people they hear these things and they search, and they it's like what can I do, what can I say, and it's like one of the, it's literally the toughest thing that you can go through, is that limbo. And how do you help that person? How do you console them? Like, what can you, right? Like, it's they're talking about something with no easy answer, right? I mean, it's not in the cards, especially as they unfold. And no matter how many times you go through it, it never like softens, the blow.
No.
So yeah, definitely get if you can reach out, if anybody knows Vice, that would be great to reach out and give some support, because it's a really tough situation on knowing what to do in these types of situations.
Yeah. So if you're on YouTube or on Twitter, maybe pop over, give some words of love from everybody here, and check out the charity that they have going. It's pretty amazing from what I've seen too. People just being very generous with that. I mean, what else can we do? It's really, really tragic. We're really sorry to hear that. So, but we will carry on. We will get into some calls here. Before we take the calls, we are going to just take a minute to shout out our patron of the week here too. So every week we do like to take a minute and shout out one special patron. For anybody who wants to support the show, Patreon is probably the best way to do it. So you can go check us out at Patreon, patreon.com/truthwanted, and become a patron and maybe get your name on the screen here. So this week's patron of the week is Caitlin Beyond. So thank you, Caitlin. You're awesome. You help make this show happen in more ways than one. And so, yeah, we really appreciate you supporting us there. And then I think we'll head into calls now. Kind of
look at those pearly whites on Dan.
Yeah. If you get on the Patreon, and then also if you were to look into I think in our YouTube membership program, you can use there's a little emoji of Dan's face too. His teeth are like just bright and shiny. Okay, so let's take some calls here. I think maybe we will talk to Kyle from Indiana. Kyle wants to talk about what are our thoughts on the early religions like the Sumerians.
Yeah, hi, Erin, Mike.
Hi.
Great to talk to you guys. I normally see Dan, but hey, Erin, you're doing a great job hosting. What I want to talk about, and so I'm a non-believer, I'm an atheist. I wish theists would call because you guys could tear them up. But we have to wonder where the human species came from. We do have a fused chromosome, and if you want to talk about science. So the question is, how did that happen? It's not been seen outside of humans or mammals. And I know the History Channel, which is ironic, plays a lot about ancient aliens. And they take it back to the Sumerian culture with the planet Nibiru and the Anunnaki. Are you guys familiar with that?
Yes,
slightly.
I am.
Yeah, I mean, not nearly as much as Erin, probably.
Yeah. So what are
right,
your
good.
thoughts? What are your
Good to
questions
know
about
that
the?
somebody knows what I'm.
I roughly
what I'm
know what
at
you're
is-
talking about. It's been a little bit while, so I might, but I think I have a pretty good idea about the Sumerian. Not only just this the historical side of it about what this ancient Sumerian culture was, but then also what it's claimed to be on shows like on the History Channel. So what is your question that you have about them? And I'll do my best.
Well, exactly. And I'm probably where you are, Erin, as far as I don't know more than what I've looked at Google. And it's basically to show ancient aliens. But there's a theory that aliens came down here, Lord only knows how long, at least 6,000 years, right? And changed us to make us smarter. Now, I'm not saying I believe this, but if I have to put this theory next to the theory of any god you put out there, I have to wonder, because this is natural. We're talking about natural creatures that evolved on other planets and came here. And if the human species doesn't see some sort of great barrier, what makes us think that we won't eventually, we're talking hundreds, maybe thousands of years from now, reach other planets?
I feel like there's like
and as much as I know that you go ahead, I'm sorry, I'll stop.
That's okay. I feel like you could cover so many different topics just in this one thing. We're talking first about human evolution. We're talking about the great leap, kind of, that some people refer to with like the human intelligence level. We're talking about the cradle of civilization and ancient civilizations before, like in Mesopotamia, before the Akkadians and the Babylonians. We're talking about now, I think you're about to jump to moving forward in intelligence, and maybe something to do with I think that's called the Sumerian paradox, about things becoming so advanced, and how do we know? There's a lot of questions that kind of get covered in that whole topic. I will bring you back to, I'll let you clarify kind of what is your main kind of thought about it, but I think,
yeah, and I have a question as well about
Cool.
the theory that you think is more plausible.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing is that you're kind of focused on the idea of so in the ancient Sumerian mythology, there was it's kind of similar to the biblical theology, where like these kind of demiurge, or I guess like modern people would call them aliens, would come down, and then that's how we got this like human intelligence level. Is that what you're wondering about?
Yes, and I'd like, Erin, thank you for saying I'm wondering about it.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean I believe this.
Sure.
I just believe that these things may be more plausible. And from the evidence that we have from those time periods, I mean, we have no evidence from those time periods saying it's not true. All we have is anecdotal.
We do have evidence that there was many different cultures that had lots of different mythological stories, and like I think that one of the downfalls of this theory is that for some reason it started just 6,000 years ago or whatever it was, which is kind of also when our beginnings of our written history, as far as like our first kind of artwork that we have, comes back to it. So one thing that my question would be, why would we think that people before that, just because they aren't leaving like a written history for us, why we think that they weren't anatomically the same as us? Like, is it putting such a thing like up on a pedestal almost, that you're only at this like level of intelligence once you start creating artwork, or when you start creating written words? That's kind of one thought I have about it.
Hey, Erin, I'm with you. But here's where I'm at when I use epistemology and the scientific method. I try and find things that say it's wrong. And there are very few things. I'm not saying that it's right. What I'm saying is there isn't so much out there that says this isn't true.
Okay, so that's where my ears perk up.
Yeah, I'm going to pass this over to Jmike, because I think I think I see where he's doing.
Yeah, that's where. So, because if you talk about epistemology, yeah. So, like, and I don't want to commit you to saying like you said, you've drawn a line in the sand. You know, it's not like you're not dying on a hill or anything. But I want to kind of go through your thought process, because, like, when I talk about epistemology, or when I discuss epistemology, it's talking about what you know, right? Saying that, like, if we go off the idea that hasn't been established, I mean, you might just back yourself into a black swan fallacy, which is not what I think you would want to do, because it could just be the fact that, like, if you're looking for a contradiction in the view, that's one thing. Like, I get that you've established a contradiction, it kind of rules that out, de facto. I get that, and I agree with you. Like, when you say, talking about like terrestrial life, you say that, you kind of make the idea that it doesn't necessarily have an inference rule to God, that it could have an inference rule to something else, which is what you're positing as a more plausible explanation. But my problem is if you're using epistemology, my question is, like, in virtue of what is it more plausible? Because it doesn't seem that it's on any epistemic basis that some other theory isn't also on. It seems to be underdetermined to me.
Okay, maybe epistemology was the wrong term. What I need to say, and I don't know the technical term for it, I guess, is I have found nothing that truly discounts it. I mean, there are possibilities out there, and I don't want to talk probability because probabilities are all about mathematics. I want to talk about nature. You know, the Drake's equation goes out to show that there's a good possibility that there are intelligent civilizations outside our terrestrial planet.
Yeah, the Drake equation, though, is more in the line of conjecture because it's not like there's no novel prediction that's actually being produced within like the idea that we can look at habitable zones and determine like, you know, if we're conservative about this estimate, that it's an abductive assessment on what's most likely. It's not an inductive assessment of the actual evidence that leads you, right? So there's a difference between abductive and inductive. Like inductive is going to be like actual evidence, right? Real empirical evidence. Abductive is what typically like more theists and people do is they try to say what best explains the data. But my challenge is that the theory that you're positing doesn't best explain it. And I would even go as far to say it's not even more plausible than another theory because I don't see like the logical inference rules from here's this thing we don't know. Therefore, my explanation here is more plausible because it seems to just be conjecture, similar to like, you know, any other thing that we could just postulate as an idea. I'm wondering like how we can't go on the basis of we haven't proven it wrong, right? Because like if I have a leprechaun in my car, I clearly wouldn't say, well, you haven't shown me it's wrong, right? Like you have to, right? It would be up to me to prove the burden that rests on my shoulders that there's a leprechaun in my car for some explicit reason, from some inexplicable reason. But the problem is that it doesn't seem like you're wanting to take the burden on that you do have on your shoulders, which is that in virtue of what is this more plausible than some other explanation?
Okay, Mike, you're fair and smart. I agree with everything you said, but here's where I'm at with like gods as far as a supernatural being. That isn't possible. There are things that are impossible, but aliens coming to planet Earth and doing some sort of experiments with human beings isn't at the same level of impossibilities as magic.
But why is that an explanation?
I mean? Because
why is that even
I think aliens are part of nature.
Okay, but I'm still curious about like what is the question that you're trying to answer here? Because is the question of why are humans like smart, or why like because we can look back on different other like in our biology and the evolutionary process, or even anthropologically, we can see how humans have developed. There's no it's kind of almost like you're appealing to some sort of a gap or like a missing link thing, like that there is some area of human development that we don't have the answers for of why and how they developed in that way. So I feel like you're kind of like, what is the question that you're trying to answer? Because I feel like the question is kind of a non sequitur to start off with. Does that make sense?
Maybe so, Erin. I'm just trying to call with, okay, we're gonna take it down to brass tacks. Why do people see natural things and believe that there's a supernatural cause for it? I don't think that my thinking, and I call it epistemology, whether you want to, maybe I'm off.
So
but
how are you?
I do believe that aliens are outside the realm of nature, where God is way outside the nature.
Okay, I'm just really confused now.
Go ahead if you have a thought there.
Well, I'm just curious on how like if you're saying it's outside of nature, aliens would be natural. It'd be part of
I was
a
going to say the same
naturalistic
thing.
framework. So I don't know how that follows, but also there's an issue of like what is you're trying to explain, and we haven't even touched on the part that like chromosome. If you go to chromosome 2 or wherever you went, or just what I thought the initial argument or entailment was, which is what explains like this rapid growth in civilization and intelligence and things like that. Well, we have explanations within biology that actually produce novel predictions, but we don't even have an alien as a candidate explanation. So I don't know why we would say an alien explaining the phenomena has a better explanatory scope and is more virtuous than one of biology, when biology actually has the candidate things that it's trying to explain producing novel predictions, whereas the thing you're positing, we can't even like investigate the thing you think explains it. We don't even know if it's actually a thing. Like, I would agree with you. I think aliens exist, but I don't know how we appeal to that without epistemic. If you're saying epistemology, I don't know how we get there without epistemic considerations. What I mean is how we know the thing we're positing to explain it is even a candidate explanation in the first place.
Well, thank you. And you know what? I'm really not standing on a hill here. I'm just
I recognize that. Definitely,
about that I haven't discounted.
Yeah.
But as far as epistemology, I believe epistemology, and this is my definition, so we're on the same page, Mike, is what I know. All right? And those things that I don't know, I do everything I can to discount. And I have found very little evidence to discount this theory.
Yeah,
it's because
but epistemology is how you know, not that you know, because
so long ago.
Well, hold on real fast, Kyle, because if you just start with this idea that, if I heard you right, that you're saying epistemology is what I know, that's evading what epistemology is. Epistemology is how you know what you know, right? There's this how part that what justifies, what's justificatory about the knowledge you have, that it is in fact actually knowledge. The problem is that you don't do that by saying, I don't know this thing, or I don't have a reason to not accept it, because then, like, I mean, clearly there are things you don't know about, right? There's things in the world that you have no access to that you don't know, right?
Okay, I'm gonna
so then,
I'm gonna take a little bit.
Well, real fast, it's just a yes or no. I'm trying to point just real fast, and I'll pass it on to Erin. I just want to make a quick point, Kyle. I just want to make a real quick point so we can stay on track.
Okay, go ahead.
There are presumably things in the world that you do not know, correct?
Oh my God, millions, if not an infinite number.
Sure. So how could we have an epistemic basis to discount things on the basis of that they haven't been proven? Wouldn't it just be better to say we don't know that they exist, but not to make the extra claim that they don't exist or that they could be impossible, like you stated with God? Doesn't that seem to be kind of backwards?
Sure, but there is evidence, or at least there is anecdotal evidence through scripts and such, to say that these things...
I have anecdotal testimony evidence that they're wrong.
Would immediately say, prove it's not. Do you?
Yeah, I have anecdotal testimony that they were wrong. Now we're both on a par, right? That's the point I'm trying to draw, is that...
Oh, we are. Very good. Thank you.
But what my point is that anecdote won't be all right.
I'm just gonna hang on a second, Kyle. I think what Jmike is trying to explain to you, that you're trying to make explanations based on the things that you have good justified reasons to believe in, right? I mean, we can believe that you can hold a position loosely that something is a possibility, like aliens, but giving making that an explanation for something when you don't have something that you can actually verifiably produce evidence for. There's no reason to now write a whole new story about what that explains about something that happened in human nature. And I think the other thing was the idea of the burden of proof of not holding positions when you're waiting for someone to disprove it, because that's no different than a theist saying
exactly.
Well, nobody's showing me that God doesn't exist. That's not how it works. That's not how we talk about things that we know, or how we are to know things. You don't sit around waiting for people to disprove every idea, because there's lots of good ideas out there. I mean, maybe not all good. There's lots of different ideas out there. And what Jmike was saying was that he, based on the evidence that you gave, which was that there is a writing that says that this explanation, this is what happened, that there was these Anunnaki came down and they did this thing, that's your justification for believing in it. And all Mike has to do is say that he has the writing that says the opposite.
I
so
just say it was
the
revealed
ground
to
that
me.
you're holding, the reason why you're holding the position is seems to be, and you said that you're not holding it very tightly and that you're just curious about this and wanting, but I think understanding what is good reasoning, what is good justification for even believing something in the first place, is the best way to move forward.
Yeah, because the theist would be doing the same thing to go, God best explains the phenomena, but we don't have evidence for God. You do the same thing by saying aliens best explain the phenomena. We don't have the evidence for the aliens.
Can both agree that aliens are probably more more probable.
I will agree with the assessment that to me it's more probable to posit something natural than supernatural. But just because you're holding back to something that's slightly more plausible than an omni-god doesn't mean that it's a good explanation for something else. But exactly. Yeah.
I'll let you come back on just for a second, Kyle, and then we're gonna let you go because we've got more calls on the line here. Did that make sense? Kind of what we were saying?
Yeah, sure, but I think I got dropped. I'm not sure.
Oh, no, I just put you on mute for a second.
All right. Thank you, guys. Awesome conversation. I'd like to call back some other time and maybe talk about other things. Yes, I am not wired to believe that this is true.
Sure.
But as far as theories on how humans became self-conscious compared to every other animal on the planet, man, I don't have a better explanation. So, not that I believe it, but I can't discount it either. Thank
Kyle,
you.
I have so much respect for you for being honest. I have a lot of respect for you for saying, look, I don't know, but this is a thing I think that is if more people did that, the world would be so much better of a place. Totally. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Kyle. Thanks for calling in. Thanks for calling in, Kyle. I do appreciate the call, and I appreciate your humility and that you're just open to this idea. I think that like we had talked about, just figuring out how do we come to know things and learning about the burden of proof and how to verify whether something's good evidence for something or not, and learning when it is a good time to attribute those things to explanations for the rest of the world, or like Mike said, making other predictions for the future. So that was an interesting call. I used to be really interested in the Sumerian stuff, and I got sucked into some of the ideas a little bit for a while. There's some pretty wild mythologies there about
what's interesting.
It is super interesting.
Yeah, there's no harm in being like an atheist and not taking consideration and things for fun. I mean, I think it's a fun thing to do.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I realized, I got also ideas like the stoned ape theory, realizing what is the thing that they're trying to explain? Is there actually a gap there? Learning more about human evolution, how did our brains develop and what part of our brains came at what point in our development, and realizing that the gap that was being filled, which is kind of it seems more like a theistic idea than anything else, to be like, when did we acquire this soul-like thing? When did we acquire this self-consciousness? It's pretty, there's a lot of things there. So I don't know. Thanks for calling.
It's not wanting to commit, but then kind of going on a lesser claim that's about the same almost,
Yeah, totally. So I do love talking about that stuff. I think it's super fun to think about alternate explanations.
Sure.
We do have some more calls on the line here, but before we get to those, we're just going to take a quick minute here to check out what else is going on at the ACA. We've got a quick moment here.
Yeah, it's a generally good idea to not just go up and tug on anybody's tail under any circumstances, but in particular, if that tail is connected to somebody's rectum, you could be doing some damage.
Then you're probably going to get the first bit of life, and then when those bits of life interact with other bits of life, new bits of life happen, and then suddenly you got people and the internet and JFK conspiracies and all kinds of stuff.
Dude, we gotta get our TV show picked up by Netflix. What do we do? What do we add? Let's impregnate people with parasitic eggs.
Michael wants to talk about how to talk to theists. I'm speaking your language, right, Nate? With the aboot, right? That's
Yep. Oh yeah.
It's
you
just,
betcha,
it's just
bud.
Cultural sensitivity.
I can summarize that, which is
hey, I think you're really cool, Matt. I don't think you've had a good conversation with a really smart theist, but I'm a really smart theist, and Sam Harris agrees with this point that I made, and somebody else agrees with this point that I made. So let me point out how science actually presupposes the existence of God, and that philosophical naturalism, which I know you don't hold to, which is irrelevant to this.
I mean, you just keep going and going and going. Try decaf, first of all.
That's always been a little bit the very beginning there, but they're talking about tugging on tails. It's not always Thursday around here.
I really liked Dan's thing there. He's like, you know, they get stuff put together, and then you got people, and then you got the internet, and then you got JFK. It's literally how the timeline went. It's unfortunately. But, yeah.
It's pretty wild. Well, I mean, we just keep it going here. We've got someone else, because we're already talking about ancient aliens, so let's keep it going here with Liam calling in from Louisiana. They want to hop on the ancient alien topic.
Yeah, just an amusing anecdote. That was a pretty intense call, but the guy in the meme picture, I'm not saying it's aliens, Giorgio Tsoukalos, you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I just did the hand thing, but maybe, I don't know if you're watching.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So I actually run into him.
In
2012, he threw a big music festival in New Orleans in association with my Mardi Gras crew I'm in, the intergalactic crew of Chewbacca's.
Well, hold on. Can I ask a question?
And yes.
Did he invite any aliens there? Were there any aliens at the party? The music?
Oh, well, I'm sure there was an open invitation.
Well, yeah, I was hoping I assumed he was friends with some or something else, which is why he believes it. But anyway, okay.
Well, the thing is that, well, when he came down, it was just kind of a business venture for the Mardi Gras crew, and we were kind of worried that he would just be this vanilla, shirt and tie banker, and it would just be a thing he was doing. But it's not. He's a nut. He is a true believer.
Yeah, I don't know much about him, but yeah, I'd be interested, like, if the invitation's open for like a spacecraft, if he like leaves the spot open in case they want to fly down and land. But
just real quick with him, he's very compelling in some of his arguments. His whole thing is that if you were a spacefaring civilization and you wanted basically planets set up as gas stations throughout the galaxy, what would be the easiest way to do that without a lot of investing your own time and effort? Find primitive species and hand drop a bunch of knowledge on them, and then come back in 1,000 years when they had invented electricity and gasoline. That's basically it. He's got that's kind of hard to argue with. There's no way.
I think it's entirely easy to argue with. What's the actual argument, right? Because like someone can just say that, but like, what is the deductive argument where the inference rules lead to that being the conclusion? Because I don't see that. It's for the same reason I don't think that a theist can have a logical entailment from saying like we see facts about DNA, and therefore it must have a God as a designer. I think it lacks the necessary inference rules that one would apply to get there. So like my thing, you don't have to phrase it in like what argue, or it's hard to argue against it. That isn't your problem. The problem is they need to actually argue for it. Yeah.
Yes, it is an extraordinary claim, and maybe not quite as extraordinary as there being an all-powerful being that did it. To me, once you get into ultimates, I'm a skeptic. I would require an infinite amount of proof for the existence of an unlimited power being.
Well, I mean, I'm just talking from the alien standpoint, right? It's like if the guy's saying like, he's giving this conjecture, and what I hear is that it's hard to argue with. I feel like it misses something in that, like, it's nobody's business to argue with someone's conjecture. It's the guy who is the conjecture's business to provide something more than it just being conjecture. So they have to actually argue for it, not that you have to argue against this idea they have, because like then you'd just be left arguing with any idea anybody ever comes up with about anything.
Yeah, and people could come up with all sorts of different stories to explain why things are the way they are. I mean, that's just I'm not quite familiar with the scenario of who the person is that you guys are talking about, but the idea
the guy that's like aliens. He does that
okay, thing. Like the guy from Ancient Aliens.
That guy, yes.
That guy, like okay.
If I'm
yeah, I mean, like,
if I'm thinking correctly, maybe I'm wrong.
They make a lot of
No, with the
claims
crazy
without
hair,
very
yeah.
much evidence, but all their story just has to be like somewhat consistent with something that people have thought about. So it's just like I don't know, they could make up the same story about that they use human hair to tie ropes, and so that's why they came down and made humans' hair grow longer on their head. I was just thinking about that because Jmike has long hair, but it's like it is a just so kind of explanation for it, but there's nothing that would give a good reason for us to even consider that to be something worth talking about, because it's I don't know, the evidence isn't there. It's just it's an I don't know if the right word is for it, but
well, it's imaginary until you can actually show that it's
and that's
actually some
again
basis of reality.
that's no different than a lot of what is like humans have done throughout all the different years with explanations for things. And before it was, in the theistic, they would explain a lot of things which have to do with like demons or fairies or leprechauns, and like there's always explanations for like different types of things.
Sure,
but there's no real evidence to move forward on why we should even consider those any of those as an explanation for our bigger explanation for things. I think that the ancient aliens story just puts it on a bigger scale, like on like why are humans here, but they also make a lot of missteps too about like the need for something, like basing a lot of it on like human agriculture, and like that's pretty myopic thinking that this is all humans have ever done is just grow or like dig for gold. Like there's a lot of things there that I think are just sensationalized and just made for entertainment.
Yeah, and the kind of the idea that I'm positing is that like everything that you say that's just an idea or conjecture about the way the world is, right? Like claims about how the world actually operates or what's happened in the past or what continues to happen, that only resides in your head, that idea, until you can show that it actually resides in reality somewhere, right? That's, to me, I think that's like the best way to handle it. Claims that people take is to go, okay, you've made a claim. It could just be the case that, that is the case. Like if you told me, you're right, if you got a cat, it's like, I know cats exist. I'll just believe you. But if someone starts talking about things that I have no basis for, like in the last call, and I know he wasn't dying on the hill for it, but to say that aliens best explain something, or this guy, saying, the crazy hair guy saying that, aliens best explain, or whatever argument he has, well, it's really just imaginary. It's just some idea in his head. That's the only thing that has been proven in the case is that it's an idea in his head that we can guarantee that's something proven. What we can't prove is that is an actual thing, that is an actual state of affairs in reality. And that's the issue. You don't have to actually go, well, it's a compelling, I don't see how I could argue against it. Because he's just disguised conjecture as some argument that's not actually an argument. It's just an idea.
Okay. Sure. Yeah, I get what you're saying 100%. But let me back up just a little bit. And I didn't mean to go so far down this rabbit hole. But maybe a more interesting. We're having a very logos conversation. I mean, I've got a bachelor's degree in science. I'm got a decent science background. I'm a very skeptical person, but I know their logical fallacies are flawed. I guess you would say flawed epistemologies, but the other ones are ethos and pathos. And I think we often get in this intellectual sort of, attack on things, which is the right thing to do it. But I think we kind of overlook the fact that, there is a huge percentage of the population that doesn't operate that way. We're talking around them. But when I say compelling, part of what I meant, and this is just sort of a cautionary tale, I know this is flawed, but when you've got somebody that you've seen on television and they're this larger-than-life personality, and just through a quirk of events, you're hanging out with them all day at this event, helping out with the event, the charisma that somebody's got to push an argument, it's amazing to see that in effect. And, something that I never really gave any consideration about aliens, but there's this weird hypnotic sort of thing about somebody who's so passionate and is such a true believer that for a minute you go, wow, wow. I mean, this guy's devoted his life to that. And I know it's flawed, but I think that we underestimate the power that has.
Absolutely. And that's where we need to have a good, I think it's important to have a good idea on how, like, basic kind of how human psychology works and understanding what our own cognitive biases are. And cognitive distortions are, and why we are or like how it is so easily that humans can the power of suggestion and influence or groupthink, or like there's a lot of different phenomenon that I think are important to just have a base understanding of, so that you can see through those kind of things where people have learned how to manipulate crowds of people. Because yeah, you're right, anybody could come in and
I've done it.
Yeah,
we talked about this before. This is a perfect time, Erin. I don't want to cut you off, so
no,
I'll mention it at some point.
I want you to tell the story, because I think I think your story is a perfect example of how people are unaware of our own psychology.
Well, Liam, I have an example. Like everyone can go look at this right now. I left the evidence up. I made a TikTok called 5D Developer. Right. I was very passionate in detailing that I was a developer that was tasked or I was given the task to basically program so that when you're scrolling through TikTok, all the spiritualists would have their pineal gland blocked, right? And so that essentially when you get on TikTok, this was a way of the government being able to implement this new feature that blocks your pineal gland so you can no longer manifest the things that you want, right? I just made some stuff up. But I said it in such a way that was convincing to spiritualists, and I had a lot of passion about it, and made videos of me coding, which was me coding like a book catalog for school. So like in things that like anybody with basic rudimentary knowledge that would see what I'm doing would go, wow, this guy's clearly trolling people. He's not actually like, if you knew what programming is, you would go, yeah, okay, this guy's trolling people just based on what he's showing us. And I got like 15,000 likes the next day. And I had like 3 to 10,000, I don't even remember what it was. It was either 3 to 5,000 or something like that, followers the next day. And like 10,000 likes on each subsequent video I did within a few hours, right? I just made this idea up while I was making pizza in my kitchen. I was like, oh, this would be funny. I was giggling to myself, and I did it. And I could have kept going with it, but I decided to say, hey, look, this is what happens when somebody can tell you something very convincingly, that you can appeal to that type of emotion. And you mentioned logos, was pathos and ethos. I think pathos has something to do with appeal to emotion, if I'm not mistaken. And that to me is just essentially that, like you're just going to some emotional aspect to it rather than the logical aspect, which to me that's what matters. There's so many things I want to believe is true, like libertarian free will, but the logical consistency matters to me, not the pathos or how I feel about it or something. So point being is that preachers do this. I've done this. People can do this all the time, but it doesn't actually elucidate what is true in the world. It just elucidates that people are convincing.
That's a great story. I think I can tie this all together. You were talking about evolutionary biology, and something that UFO caller said that left an impression on me. I wrote this down. He said, why do people see natural events and jump to supernatural explanations? And so, evolutionarily, we're wired for certain things. Like, the reason why fat and sugar taste really good to us is we could hardly ever get it when we're living in hard times. And that's why people get addicted to junk food. Okay. And so a lot of these, conspiracy theories that go around, they seem like junk food for the mind. So I'm wondering if there's a mismatch between our evolutionary wiring to want to know, something keeps you awake at night, you can't sleep, you have anxiety, you want an explanation, and the fact that now we can just Google anything. So to tie it into the sort of moral philosophy idea, if you've got a good skeptical take on reality, but is there a non-removable need in people to have an answer? Is there an onus on us to go with the least harmful untruth? Does that make any sense?
Maybe.
Are you asking like that? Like, is there? I'm not sure if you said like, is there something wrong with it? But like, is it pretty like normal or I mean typical for people to have that desire to have like a story behind their experiences or have something? I can't remember how you worded it. I'm so sorry.
I think he's going to some aspects of like the good. Were you going there? Like you were going into normativity.
Well, earlier you said that something was a true explanation, but also a virtuous explanation. So if people are going to just stop at some point and say, I need an explanation, and we can't necessarily give them both. It's frustrating when creationists try to put this on us to tell them what happened before the Big Bang or some nonsense like that. We don't have to explain everything, but
it can just be a brute fact. You could just deny what's called the PSR and just say it's a brute fact, right? Like you could say not everything has to have an explanation, which I deny the PSR. So someone like myself is going to say, which by the way, the PSR is principle of sufficient reason that everything should have an explanation. But you could just say that it's a brute fact.
And I think there's going to be different people too that are like have different levels of discomfort that they're able to live with as well. I think that there's a lot of people who the idea of not knowing something is unbearable for them, and that's why they will continue to seek out these things that will give them all the explanations that they need. But then there's other people who they're just the way that they move through their life. They don't have that same kind of existential kind of questions that go on in their head, or maybe they do, but they can learn to live with some of the discomfort of not knowing everything. So I think that would break down into different personal psychologies.
Right, and there probably is a special type of person that just finds an easy theistic answer for everything satisfying, and they don't want to mull it over anymore. But
there's a lot of them.
what I was trying to, yeah, right. And so I guess the question I was trying to ask in a convoluted way, is even though we think we have a better handle on the truth, if we think that someone is incapable of just coming to this high-level, logical, scientific analysis of everything all the time, would it be moral, and I don't have an answer, I'm just asking, to substitute a more harmless untruth? And, instead of religion and people maybe occasionally starting a holy war of saying, oh, all that stuff in the Bible, it was aliens. I really believe that. And to use your trolling powers, would it be moral to convince people of a more harmless lie?
I'm an moral anti-realist, so like my answer might not be satisfactory to a lot of atheists, or maybe it will be, or maybe not even you. So when you talk about should we do something that's good, to me, I get lost on we have to define good and in virtue of what the person holds valuable. But yeah, Erin, I don't know if you want to go on that, because I don't know.
I get what you're saying. I do get what you're saying, because there are some people out there that you could consider the fact of trying to bring them into like a more epistemological, like grounded way of looking at the world, that it could cause them a level of anxiety or stress. I think that I could see how that you may be able to see that as doing harm to somebody. But at the same time, I think that by making a choice for somebody, whether you're just going to allow them to know this much because you've determined that it's not going to be harmful, is denying some sort of autonomy that they have. So obviously, like allowing people to make their own decisions and giving people the resources and the tools to get to a place where they are comfortable with the knowledge that they have. I think that it is, obviously, I do think that it's going to be good to believe things that are true. And there are going to be people out there that don't have that high level, like that they value that as much as I do. But I don't think that making a decision to allow people to live with things that are, or to believe in things that are untrue, is going to be a good move for us, I guess. I'm not sure where that fits into moral anti-realism.
Yeah. Well, I just think we break that down in like the way that you go, like ought one. Right, it's like the same moral question, like ought you be moral, ought you be good, or ought I care about what you call epistemic norms, right? Like the way that we should conduct epistemology, or the way we should we come to truth? Should we want to know that? For the same reason, from the moral perspective, I think it's like I'm a subjectivist, but I still think every person uses well-being for their basis. I don't think there's an objective fact of the matter. I think everybody uses that, even Christians, right? When they don't want to, they want to go to heaven and not go to hell directly because it relates to their well-being, because they're the ones burning in hell, right? It directly relates to their well-being first. And I think it's the same thing with epistemology or knowing. I would go as far as to say it's not good to give someone like false truths or something like that in effort to get them to learn if you don't pull the curtain back at some point, because I'm willing to say everything epistemically, people are going to want to know. If you really, I don't know people that don't want to know. It would seem to be contradictory in their life to make that statement and then go about their life, right? So maybe there's not an objective fact of the matter that we ought to know things that are true. But I think if we break it down, every person practically and pragmatically lives their life that way. And so all we should do in the cases like, say, what I did, for example, and kind of give some lie, is to recognize that does cause harm. Because the thing that I did was go, I can't keep this up for more than a day. Because the first thing I thought of is someone could seriously hurt themselves if they believe what I'm saying, and maybe they're just not stable in some way, or maybe they are and they just completely are convinced of something. So yeah, there's a level of responsibility to when you're going to present things, if that's what your question is. Hopefully I'm hitting it right. But if you're presenting things that could be false in virtue of getting someone to see the error in that way, I mean, you got to pull the curtain back at some point, because otherwise, look, just beliefs in general, whether true or false, can have some impact on society. So
sure. Yeah, and so I guess I get what you're saying. I like what you're saying, that you have to pull the curtain back eventually. But I guess I'm still pondering, and will probably be pondering for a while, this concept of getting your foot in the door, of taking someone who's just got this unswerving conviction in something that produces harmful behaviors and impinges on the rights of others and things. If you could loosen the grip of that delusion with a more harmless delusion. And I get what you're saying. I'm getting kind of out of my depth. I should probably let you guys move on when it comes to moral philosophy. I'm not as studying that. I'm more of a science guy. And in response to Erin, real quick, I think you and I probably just come down on different sides of the question of free will. I'm pretty solid on the concept that even though it doesn't seem fun to believe it, that through meditation practice and from what I know about science, it's pretty mechanistic. I do think that there's a random element in thought sometimes, but I don't really worry about morally restricting the capacity of others to make pre-decisions and choices, when I think a lot of that is at least 99% an illusion. It's hardwiring, not a popular opinion.
All right.
Anyway, guys, it's been a fantastic conversation. It kind of went in unusual directions. Maybe I'll call back another time and we'll just talk about like hard science stuff, because I do think there's more room and all that. I've had quantum mechanics 101, and there's a lot there to play with, and people use it to justify things, but it's extraordinary in other ways, and that'd be a fun conversation to have sometime.
Yeah. Definitely call us back sometime. This conversation definitely took a couple of turns, but it was really interesting. So thanks for giving us a call. We'll talk to you again sometime.
It's the nature of conversation sometimes. It's like, because you're trying to understand the point, and sometimes it's formulated better in your head than when it actually comes out. I typically find myself doing that a lot, and so and like it's just the nature of the beast, And
when you're talking through something, like sometimes I have thought about something ahead of time and kind of have my thoughts on it. Sometimes I'm working through it out loud while we talk.
Exactly. Yeah.
And then that comes up with another idea, and that's probably the nature of call-in type shows, is that we do have like a little bit of a time crunch. So, but I mean, I'm always happy to see kind of where conversations go with people. It was kind of, I definitely didn't kind of see that conversation going that way, but it was interesting. I'm one to think, like, once you think of something like and you're formulating, I'm gonna go, okay, I'm thinking of this right now just in case it sounds really stupid by the time I'm finished, because that is totally a possibility. Okay. We've got a few more calls on the line here. I think we should, let's see. I've got a couple calls here. Some that I actually don't think I'd be that great at, but I think you would be really great at. So I think I'd like to talk to Alex from Colorado. He has a question read this. Questions about falsifiability and presuppositions. Alex from Colorado.
Hi guys, how's it going?
Hey.
Good. How are you?
It's really nice to talk to you guys. I'm pretty new to Truth Wanted, but I've been a fan of all the other shows for a long time. Erin, forgive me, it's the first time I'm kind of interacting or seeing you. Jmike, I've been a fan of yours for quite a while. But what I wanted to get to, sorry, I'll get right to it, is questions about, like I said, about presuppositions. And, you know, I think broadly familiar with presuppositional lists, right? And kind of the presup argument as at least as I think, right? I guess my question is, do we all have some level of presup? Like, do we have to have a presup to even get past solipsism?
That depends. I had a coffee with somebody who's super into philosophy, and they maintain that they have no presuppositions at all. I kind of took a similar line of reasoning. I kind of backed off that. I think that you do have to. There are certain things that you have to presuppose to get off the ground, and even just axiomatically, there's going to be some things that are potentially circular, but everybody kind of has to buy into those same things, right? So, like, if someone's like, if I present an argument to somebody and I go, or they present an argument, I say it's circular, and they go, yeah, but fundamentally, one of our axioms is going to be kind of circular. It's like you don't go there because we've both moved on from that point. Now it's kind of a basis of like where we go from there. If you're circular again, that's an issue. You don't want to continuously being circular if we've kind of acknowledged the initial axiom might either be presupposed or somehow circular in some way. So some people can take the route where they don't have any presuppositions, right? So, like, are you familiar with the laws of thought, like non-contradiction, excluded middle, and identity?
Yeah. Yes.
So it's like some people will take that, like, because you experience, right? It's some experience you have that you have no choice in the matter, right? If I tried to write an argument of me not existing in some state, like, it would rely me putting pen to paper to make the argument, thus kind of disproving any argument and going against that because I'm doing something. And so their idea is kind of identity is self-evident, right? And so you start with identity. Right? It's not presupposed. I'm acknowledging it after the fact. And I'm acknowledging that I can't exist and not exist at the same time. Right? Now, I don't know how they cash that out, but that is an argument that they could take.
Okay, and so is that what kind of, I mean, I guess where I'm going is that level of presup what gets us around solipsism? Because, I mean, I think we both have to agree, you know, to have a conversation that, you know, we're not hard solipsists, right? That you know, we both agree that we do exist kind of thing. So are we presupposing that, or is that kind of, am I taking the presup term and kind of bastardizing it into something?
Oh, no, I mean, no, I think you're making, that's a great point to go to. So it's like, yeah, I mean, I'm someone that's going to say I can't solve external world skepticism, which is my biggest problem with presuppositionalists, and I'll get into that. But yeah, I can't solve external world skepticism. Maybe you can present some argument, like a deductive argument for solipsism, and I can show why that, you know, isn't valid or not sound. But the general thesis of external world skepticism, like, did a demon create me 5 minutes ago with all my memories intact? It's totally, I don't see a logical contradiction why that couldn't be the case. So yeah, I'll have to just kind of presuppose what you call ontology, right? Like, that this is the actual world that I'm experiencing. I don't think that you have to presuppose like existence, like, right? It seems to be the case that regardless of if I'm a brain novad or any of these things, I'm existing in some form, right? I can move from that. Now, if I'm like in a brain in a vat or something like that, like, I have no access to that. This is a waste of my time to worry about any of that. It could be the case, but I'm here dealing with the after effects. That's what I'm going to deal with. Now, the presuppositionalist, it's different because they're going to do, so they presuppose a specific form of ontology. They're presupposing this thing, God, right? For like intelligibility. It would be like me presupposing that there's these things called flobablas, and that explains why that explains why, like, Joe won a race, right? Joe competed in a race and he won, and my presupposition on why he won is that there's flobablas. Now, if someone came to me and goes, look, that's backwards. You need to know what a race is, right? So that means that I run faster than you, by the finish line I win. And we go, okay, Joe won that race. What does that imply to us? It implies there's some reason why Joe beat him. We go further into knowledge. We go, oh, there's these things called genes, right? Genes explain why Joe won the race, right? Now, we might have to start from some base presuppositions. But if we started from a presupposition like blah blah blah, this specific ontology is why Joe won the race faster, it's no different than a precept that says God's the reason. Because anytime someone presents an epistemic reason to say, well, actually, no, blah, blah, blah doesn't exist. It's actually this thing called genes, right? And the analogy I'm using is, no, God doesn't exist. It's actually just natural, right? The only thing that they can say is that, well, no, I presuppose God. They're going to go to that as their authority for what you would call your epistemic authority. They're going to go to that, and they would never, ever be overturned. So it's a difference between starting with a very specific ontology that you're presupposing, as opposed to saying, look, I could be a brain in a vat. I'm not making claims towards ontology, but there are certain things within the experience that I have to presuppose. And that's, to me, that's epistemically way better than what a precept does.
Yeah, and so to that last point you just made, right, does the concept of something like Occam's razor come in here? Would you believe it does, that it's most logical to believe something or presuppose, like if I'm using this term incorrectly, forgive me, but if we're using that and we're saying I'm presupposing, is it more logical to presuppose something that is the simplest, right, the easiest explanation like Occam's razor versus, the precept God argument? Like, would you agree with that, or am I conflicted?
Well, yeah, so I you could use Occam's razor. I go with principle of parsimony, which is basically the same thing. So it's just the idea that, like,
I've never heard that term. Can you explain that?
Principle of parsimony, yeah. So it's basically essentially like the same idea. It's going to look at simplicity of the theory and in conjunction with the explanatory scope, right? So, like, I could explain everything by saying God, right? But, like, is that the simplest explanation? No, there's probably simpler explanations. Right. And if I find a simpler explanation that explains the entire scope, well, for me, that's more virtuous. I'm going to go with that theory because I don't have to postulate like more ontology than I need, like God, right? Like it's just unnecessary.
Right.
So does that answer?
Yeah, it does. And I think my last question, maybe I'll let you guys move on, is around. So I tie some of this around into unfalsifiability, right? And I think I agree with you guys in the sense that anything that's unfalsifiable is kind of not. I don't know that it'd say it's not worth investigating, but it's not worth, in my opinion, belief, right? But does that kind of and I've heard different comments on the shows of if something's unfalsifiable, I don't want to use words like absurd, but it's not something worthy of belief, but at some level, again, around this, do we have to assume there are a few things that are unfalsifiable, again, to get us past solipsism? Or am I, again, conflating that?
So I'm trying to understand, because if you're saying, like, it seems to me that the solipsistic theory is unfalsifiable, but I'm admitting that could be the case, right? So, like, I'm going to say, like, I don't know how I falsify that theory, but in virtue of not being able to falsify it, like, it could be the case. That's fine because I haven't actually identified some logical contradiction within the theory, right? Like saying, like, we could talk about God, but if I have what's called an a priori argument for like atheism that just shows why God's impossible deductively, like it didn't matter that the theists' theory was unfalsifiable. I can just have an a priori argument that actually debunks so you don't have to stick within just like the science realm of falsification. You can look at deductive arguments and go, okay, well, like, where's the logical contradiction entailed? That kind of debunks it. And you can kind of go from that standpoint. I think there's different ways to do it epistemically than just a falsification criterion necessarily. And then another one would be the thing you mentioned earlier about comparing worldviews, which, by the way, I don't know why atheists die on the hill to allow presuppositionalists to poke at their worldview. Don't do that. Everybody stop doing that. Don't let presuppositionalists go, how do you account for X, Y, and Z? Their whole thesis is that no matter what you say, God is a better explanation than anything you can offer, right? What the thesis is that intelligibility can only, if you put it in a syllogism or just a premise, intelligibility can only exist if and only if the Christian God exists. That is a burden that they have to show. They have claimed to solve the explanatory gap that they presume is there, right? And so it doesn't matter if, like, you're talking to a precept. You could just be illogical. You could be demented. Your brain could not work the way it worked yesterday and it's just off, right? That could be the case, but it doesn't actually elucidate the explanatory gap they are positing solves the issue. And so I'm saying that as a rant because I see a lot of people go into these conversations and they feel the need to defend. You don't have to defend anything. You just have to show what you have to ask them for the actual argument why God serves as the actual explanation and why we even need that for intelligibility in the first place.
Well, and it seems very much like, to me, it always feels like a very simple shifting the burden of proof, right? And trying to bring that to somebody else, but they don't have to worry about it because they just presuppose it. And I've got some religious friends. I've got a couple good friends that are Mormon that I enjoy debating and are very open to debate with me and discuss this kind of stuff. And I've tried to get to call into the shows several times, but I've never encountered a presup, so I've never been able. Other than watching them on shows and stuff, and I don't think I would, like most, enjoy discussing anything with the presup because of that stance, right? So okay, I guess my final question would then be: Is there anything outside of this that is unfalsifiable, that is logical to believe in?
Well, so I'm trying to think of this on the top of my head, but it could be the case that some non-natural realm exists or something, right? And we can't really falsify that given the natural means we have, but maybe deductively someone could show the entailment, but I don't know how that would be cashed out. I'm just trying to be the devil's advocate and say, we don't have to die on the hill for falsification, but I think if you're talking empirical inductive evidence, then yes, you should, right? Here's the philosophical distinction, right? A posteriori considerations, which is a fancy word for empirical considerations, you're going to have to falsify the claims dealing with a posteriori arguments. A priori, which is to say deductive, things that don't necessarily need experience of the world, but just deductive reasons. That's where I could find someone having an unfalsifiable claim or from an inductive standpoint, but maybe deductively it follows. I'm a skeptic of that. So I don't claim that that's the case, but I'm just trying to posit maybe where they could rest their head,
Yeah, I got you. And because, I'll say for me personally, I think a lot and struggle a lot with solipsism, right? I'm certainly not a solipsist, right? But at the same time, it is one of the things philosophically that just really messes with me. And I'll admit that in some ways, what bore all this, my questions was, I find myself, I wouldn't say convinced, right? I found myself fascinated and yeah, that's the best word, around the simulation hypothesis, right? Brain in the vat, everything around solipsism, right? And I'm trying to look for ways, I think, to kind of break out of that, right? To debunk that to myself, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Where I started with the precept, do we have to start with some sort of precept to get out of that? And so that's where I was going with this.
So yeah, I guess for me as a skeptic, I don't feel the need to solve those issues in the sense I kind of accept that so I'm like a skeptic of a lot of things in metaphysics as well, or metaphysical claims, where I'm just gonna go, I don't know how we have access to that. I'm actually probably gonna take the bird and say we don't have access to that. It's just we can't, right? We're left in this level of speculation, which is fine, but I kind of use that as ammo in a sense, because if I am having, like you said, if you're having issues, maybe it's the case that I'm a brain of that, or you have some considerations that you're trying to work through. Well, this just highlights issues, especially if we go back to the precept thing, right? If you go back to the root of what they presuppose, like God, well, it could be the case that God is deceitful and giving them propositions that are actually false, but he's revealing them as true.
Sure.
So this problem doesn't stop, it's not like any other buddy's position has solved this external world potential issue, because everybody is going under the basis of your phenomenology, your sense data. So the things that you think are revealed to you by God, or the nature that you're in right now, right, that this has been revealed to you that you're not a brain in the vat, we all have this issue of not actually having something completely justify that, which is why I'm a skeptic entirely, is under this principle that this is just an issue for anybody and everybody, no matter how confident the person comes along. I don't see why people want to die on the hill and act like they're smarter than they are to say we can get around this. We can't. We cannot get around this.
And that's where I can't either. And just to be clear, right? Like I don't want to come off as, that I actually believe this or would base any sort of worldview around or anything like that. It's just, I remember in the chat earlier was kind of discussing like, a little bit of what is belief or what is, I felt like these kind of things, right? And that's, where I say, I didn't want to use the word convinced. That was a poor choice. I think I even backtracked it a little bit, right? But I find that concept I always have fascinating since I read about it. And, and I also, to clarify that, to the point you made, I'm perfectly fine with not knowing certain things, right? And accepting that there are, a million things. And that's another thing that was going on in chat, right? That, we're all going to die not knowing things and understanding that, things aren't going to be explained to us or certain things that are just outside of our ability, right?
Sure.
So, well, thanks.
I'd have to agree with the chat there.
What was that? Sorry, I didn't hear Jmike.
Oh no, you're fine. I was just saying I'd have to agree with the chat there. Like that's that's just kind of the reality we have to accept.
I think that like the idea of hard like solipsism is something that we're all like most people come up to and struggle with at one point or another. So I think it's definitely something that I think I fall more on your side with that, Mike, that like I would almost take on that position too, that we can't access that. So
yeah, and you can use that as ammo towards theists when they tell you that God's been revealed something to them.
Yeah.
How do they know? The same way that like they would question you, how do you know that what's revealed to you is actually the world? How do they know that God's revealed true propositions to them? Because he can reveal false propositions. In both cases, no logical contradiction.
Right. Yeah. So I'm gonna let you go, Alex, because we are coming near the end of our time here. But I'll let you pop on for one more second here. Thank you so much for calling in today, and hopefully you come up with more ideas and call us back in the future.
Yeah, thanks for the call.
Sorry,
I just demolished over you the whole time there.
No, I was gonna say for anybody who is like listening to this later on in podcast, and not like seeing me, that was me being like totally schooled and just trying to sit back and listen to some people.
Oh no, don't.
I do. Well, I think I do kind of understand. I understand a lot of what you guys are talking about, and I have thoughts here and there, but there's just so many concepts and different words. We and I were talking about that earlier today. Yeah. That like a lot of these ideas are like they sound very big and intimidating, but there are things that like you can make sense of it once you kind of sift through and understand it more. So I love listening to those conversations because I don't feel like I have as much to add to it, but at the same time, once I hear everybody talk through it, I'm like, oh, I think I understand actually what they're talking about. But there's just different terminology sometimes. Like I'd never heard it called that external world problem. I'd only ever heard it called hard solipsism.
Yeah, external world. I call it external world.
Yeah, so just little things like that. I think is really interesting to listen to. So but I appreciate those kind of calls, and I sometimes struggle whether something like solipsism is a philosophical question or more of a psychological question. I don't know.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, for me, it's like I've talked to people that have claimed they can show logical contradictions, but it's only in virtue of the argument that's presented. Like they had given an argument, and I go that doesn't follow. But the same way that we could debunk some theist argument for God doesn't mean that God now doesn't exist because we debunked like one argument, right? So I don't take the claim that I think some of my friends do, that just to me I think it's just a level of hubris that I'm not willing to take.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you breaking that down and having that conversation with him. I think that's it we're at the top of the hour now, so we're gonna sign off here pretty quickly, but I appreciate you so much coming on the show, and
well, thank you for having me.
Yeah, I feel like I learned a lot, and I just appreciate you coming on here and bringing a different kind of aspect to the conversation than I would normally bring. So it's cool to see different voices in the ACA and in the atheist community in general, bringing all these different things to the conversation.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. Yeah, I hopefully I didn't confuse anybody, because sometimes I've feel after I'm done I'm just like there's much better ways to explain that.
I think it was good.
I'm trying to like transition into a position of like breaking things down better, because I realized after the fact that I thought I did when I never did. So yeah.
Oh,
so if anybody has any or if I said anything, you have any problems, you can. Well, there it is, right there. truth@atheistcommunity.com.
I was just gonna say, if you
so.
have more thoughts about the conversation, if you want to dig into more like the definitions or any of that, you can give us. You can contact us through truth@atheist-community.org. If you are interested in talking to Jmike or myself after the show tonight, you can come join us on the Discord. The Discord community is a community run by fans and put on for the fans. So these conversations kind of go on all the time over there. So feel free to like pop on there at any time, but specifically right after the show, we'll both be there for a quick chat. Another way to connect is through our Facebook group. The Facebook group is also run by the fans. Another way, just another avenue to connect with people who are interested in these conversations, or sometimes to just share the odd, funny meme or something like that. And then if, like I mentioned earlier, that if on the podcast, if somebody was like listening and they would see me just kind of gazing into the camera for a while there, listening. If you're interested in just listening to the programs via podcasts, you can do that. We have a one-stop shop for all of our ACA programs at tiny.cc/AEN podcasts. So I'm a big podcast person. If I'm not able to sit down and watch something, I'll have the headphones in and just be like cruising around doing my things, listening to a podcast all the time. And then as I'm representing my merch here again today too, because I'm not just trying to be a major sellout. I actually find this to be one of the most comfortable shirts that I own. If you want to support us by getting something back, you can go check out our merch store. Comfortable, really surprisingly comfortable shirts and hoodies and stickers and masks and all of that there.
So I was trying to get my home team shirt, but I spilled coffee on it before we went live, so I had to button up the shirt.
Well, I was gonna maybe try something else because I just wore this not too long ago, but I'm like, it legitimately is becoming my favorite shirt, so I'm just gonna wear it again because I like it.
Well, it's like we're wearing our team shirts. Do we have get a Super Bowl or something? Do I get to like play you in the playoffs, or is that how this works? It's like sports.
Well, I don't know, because I think that out of all of the different teams from the ACA, that our crew is probably the most important, and so I think we should check in there and see what their team colors are.
I agree.
Thank you, crew. These are the people who make everything happen. They're the ones who run all the stuff behind the scenes on our audio and our tech and communications and getting us all organized and set up for the week. So we love them, and I thank you guys for everything that you do.
And Nate's the one that cuts my power because he doesn't want to do a show with me. That's his way of getting out. But anyway, we'll deal with that some other time.
Yeah. Jmike, where can everybody find you? You're a few places. Where can people in the audience find you if they want to hear more about what you do?
Yeah, so I guess the main thing, Talk Heathen. So if you want to go check out Talk Heathen, go check out Talk Heathen. Any other way to get a hold of me? I'm on Discord every now and then through different servers. Sometimes I'll hop in and listen and have conversations. And then you can email at jmike@atheist-community.org. And so, just those are the ways to check me out.
Awesome. Keep the conversation going. Yeah. Well, thank you so much again for coming onto the show tonight and being my guest. And we'll see you shortly over the Discord. Hopefully everybody joins us over there. So thank you, everybody. And remember to always keep wanting the truth.
Watch the Nonprofits and join the hosts in the live chat, Sundays at 3 p.m. Central between the Atheist Experience and Talk Heathen. Visit tiny.cc/YTNP.